Hey, welcome back to Guitar Gathering. It's been a little while since I've made a video. I haven't bought a new guitar or anything in quite a while, but a few months ago I did make a new acquisition, and it was the Line 6 HX Stomp XL. This is replacing my Line 6 M13, which is the M13, in case you didn't know, is just essentially a pedal modeler, and a lot of capability in that in terms of having a variety of pedals on and off at the same time, and some good routing capabilities, and pretty good tone overall from it for what I do. Right, I'm just in a classic rock cover band. I don't need a whole heck of a lot of effects. I just kind of run your basic expected effects: delay, reverb, maybe maybe a phaser or a flanger, an octave pedal, that kind of thing. Not a whole heck of a lot of fancy effects for what I'm doing. So I don't need a ton of pedals, but I like some variety, and it's nice to be able to kind of pick and choose. And so that's where these Line 6 products seem to come in handy. What I'll tell you is this thing can turn your favorite single channel tube amp into 60 or 50 different amps. However many amps come as models in this, you can turn your amp into any one of those, and I'll talk you through how I do that. First, I am really happy with this device. The sound quality is way better than the M13. The M13 isn't bad, but like the improvement is marked and highly noticeable to my ears and to my opinion. I think it's just because it's a lot more powerful from a processing standpoint. In terms of my use cases, the primary use case is, that white amp behind me. That's my MGL 50. It's my favorite amp. It's perfect for classic rock music. It's got a decent amount of gain. It's not over the top, and it just sits perfectly for the type of music I'm doing. But it is, essentially a single channel amp with a couple little toggle switches, and it has a wonderful Metro lossless FX loop in it, and that's what makes this work so well with that amp. So I connected up 4-cable method, pretty standard stuff, and so it goes into the loop of my amp, and then I can decide where I want stuff to sit as it relates to preamp or post preamp going into the power section. So it's very easy to manipulate that. I'll show you some stuff here in HX Edit that will make things kind of become more apparent in terms of what I'm doing and how I'm using the capabilities of this thing. So in HX Edit, there's a great preset here. It's number 20A if you have it set up to give you, numbers and letters, and it's 4cm for 4-cable method, and it's preamp swap. And so what this is doing is utilizing the loop in your amp to remove the preamp section of your favorite tube amp and replace it with a preamp or amp from within the modeling amps here. No speaker cap, just the amp. And it's very, very cool. I can't tell you how much I'm enjoying monkeying around with this. So here's the FX loop. I have it set up with delay and reverb after, and the reason I have delay and reverb after the fact of the FX loop is because if I decide to turn on the loop and off the modeled amp, then my delays and reverbs are where I want them in the signal chain for how I would normally set up the 4-cable method. Then I can do some distortions, pre-loop, pre-amp. I can do a little boost after if need be, and going into my FX loop. So you can do whatever you want here. But the beauty of this is that when this gets set up, you are able to, or this preset I should say, has the FX loop and the model amp assigned to a single foot switch button. And what makes this so elegant is you get the levels right, you can just press one button and it turns off the modeled amp and turns on your FX loop. And what happens then is you just get your normal amp tone back. So it brings the FX loop in your amp kind of back into the picture in terms of having the preamp, that's your amp, back into the mix. You press that button again and it reverts back to the modeled amp, eliminating the preamp section of your regular tube amp. So it makes for your amp to be essentially a two-channel amp, but you can have such a diverse tone from what you might be used to in your amp. So for example here, one of my presets that I have is, let's say I got a Fender Twin here. That's really good. And then here's a Fender, Princeton. And you have it all dialed in. If I press the foot switch button, the loop turns on, this turns off, and I've got an MGL 50, which is essentially a Marshall, cranking right along. But if I need a cleaner tone, then this is just sitting right there, and it's so diverse from what my amp normally sounds like. So in my experience working with this over the past couple of weeks or so, I found a couple of things to be aware of. Number one, if you're using the preset that's built into the HX Stomp, the FX loop, if you intend to use to turn the loop on and off so that you can use your regular amp, you got to make sure the send is back up to 0. What I found is in that stock preset it was at -6 dB, and all of a sudden I was wondering, why does my amp not sound like my amp anymore? And it was that. So that's just one thing to be aware of. The second thing to be aware of is the difference between preamp and amp. So the preamp section of this is literally just the preamp section of the modeled amp and nothing else. And some of these models sound just fine using the preamp only, others not so much. And I found that to be the case, especially with, it was like the Grammaticos. Those preamps just didn't sound good. They were very weak. Same thing with the Essex AC30. Even the Princeton was kind of quiet. And I found that instead of using the preamp, if I just used the full amp, that made it sound a lot better. So here's the key thing to mention is channel volume. If you're using the full amp, turn the channel volume down to around 5 or a little bit less before you start switching back and forth between your regular amp and the modeled amp, because you want to try to have volume kind of on par with each other, so you aren't blowing your ears out or doing any potential damage to your amp by overblowing it with an extra hot signal. So if you're going to do this, which I highly recommend you do because it's a ton of fun, channel volume down to about 5 or less, and then tweak according to what you're after. But this is my favorite capability within this. The other use case I have, like I said, is I'm just using a 4-cable method for effects for the most part. But I've got some other settings here that are for direct. And this is pretty cool. So in the event that something goes wrong with my amp, a tube blows up, whatever, power transformer catches on fire, whatever the problem is, this device can just go direct to the front of the house. You can use, I've loaded up Owen Hammer IRs into here. I've customized and tweaked some of the Marshall amps and just made a row of effects here that makes sense to me. So if my head were to blow up, I can just move some cables around and this thing will go right to the front of the house. I'll get sound through the monitors on stage, and it sounds really good. Is it as good as my tube amp? No, but is it good enough to play a gig with and have nobody bat an eye at it? Yeah, it's that good. So very, very powerful device. I'm really happy with it. Like I said, my favorite feature is that you can take your favorite amp and turn it into however many amps are in here. I don't know how many that is. I don't know, 25, 30, something like that. It's a lot. So a lot of fun. I'm enjoying it. I'm really happy with the purchase, and I highly recommend it. Have a great day.